slavery. It is Matt Juggernaut Adams versus Godless Engineer. Godless will be going first. We're going to go straight into this with his 5-minute opening. Godless, when you're ready, I'll click start on the timer. You can also keep your own timer if you would like as well.
Okay. Let me just share my screen here.
Also, welcome to the live chat. Appreciate you joining.
Yep. I got my own thing going on over there, so let me, hold on. I think I need to fix this just a little bit.
And then I will be here, guys, but if my screen goes off, it's just because I'm eating pizza. I have not eaten all day. I've been working.
Okay. All right. Let's pull it up. Okay. All right. So I'm ready to start whenever you're ready to start.
Alrighty, you may begin.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone for taking part in this debate. Over the next 5 minutes, I will demonstrate that the Bible endorses slavery. There are multiple types of slavery endorsed in the Bible: debt slavery, chattel slavery, and sexual slavery. First, let's define slavery. Dr. Josh defines slavery in his book, Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery, as a condition in which an individual or rights to their labor is owned by another, either temporarily or permanently. The owner controls and is legally allowed to derive benefit from the actions and activities of the owned individual. Next, let's talk about debt slavery. Indentured servitude. In Exodus 21, 20 and 21, and 26 and 27, there are rules for how to treat your debt slaves. A slave owner can beat a debt slave as long as they don't die immediately, and debt slaves can be freed if a body part is destroyed. Debt slaves could also become chattel slaves. The law permits the individual to become a chattel slave if his master gives him a slave wife and has children with her, children who are legally the master's property, and if he chooses to stay with his family upon his release. But it's clear that debt slaves, being Israelite slaves themselves, were afforded more rights than chattel slaves. Now, let's look at chattel slavery. Zaccanini writes in Westbrook's A History of Ancient Near Eastern Law that chattel slaves and their offspring, unlike people in debt servitude, could be transferred or sold. This sentiment is well supported in biblical literature. The obvious verse to cite here is Leviticus 25:44 through 46, which states that you can purchase chattel slaves from the nations around you and pass them down to your children as property, but you cannot treat Israelites this way. God makes a clear distinction here between foreigners and fellow Israelites and how you should treat them differently. In Exodus 21:28 through 32, God makes a clear distinction between how Israelites were to treat debt slaves versus chattel slaves. As a matter of fact, in Leviticus 25:39 through 43, God further clarifies that Israelites can no longer be treated as slaves. Instead, they have to be treated as hired workers. This treatment does not apply to non-Israelite people, further demonstrating that God intended that both debt and chattel slavery exist and define rules he endorsed for managing them both. Finally, let's address sexual slavery. Mark Klomberg defines sexual slavery in commentary on the Roman statute as sexual slavery is a particular form of enslavement which includes limitations on one's autonomy, freedom of movement, and power to decide matters relating to one's sexual activity. Thus, the crime also includes forced marriages, domestic servitude, or other forced labor that ultimately involves forced sexual activity. Another aspect of sexual slavery we must acknowledge, according to Dr. Jennifer Bird in her book Marriage in the Bible, is that marriage, in the modern sense, did not exist in the Hebrew Bible. As there was no verb for to marry in Hebrew at the time, the verb often translated into marriage means to take, as in to take possession of. This aspect of the Israelite culture is critical to my first example of sexual slavery in the Hebrew Bible, the story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel in Genesis 29. The main points to consider in this story are Leah and Rachel's father agreed to sell his daughters to Jacob as salary for work. This makes Leah and Rachel sexual slaves. To add insult to injury, God also made Leah and Rachel infertile. To provide Jacob with children, the sisters forced their own slave girls to have sex with and bear Jacob's children without their consent, making their slave girls sexual slaves. Sadly, this isn't the only example in the Bible of a father selling his daughter into sexual slavery. My next example is Numbers 31, 17,
1 minute
18.
left.
In this story, Moses demands the Israelites kill all the Midianite women and children except the virgin girls. This allowed the warring Israelite men to claim these young girls as property, making them sexual slaves. The Hebrew Bible further demonstrates that God condones these actions in Numbers 31, 25 through 30, in which God tells Moses how to inventory plundered capital, including people. And finally, my conclusion, as I've demonstrated, God condones several types of slavery in the Bible. He condones debt slavery and indentured servitude. He condones chattel slavery and commands the keeping and purchasing of slaves. He condones and commands the sexual enslavement of women. Apologists spend a lot of time twisting the references I have presented to you into something they are not. That is the whole point of apologetics, to make excuses for the abhorrent words very clearly articulated in the Bible. Apologists purposefully obfuscate context and completely ignore the many examples where God makes clear the distinctions between debt slavery. I've just got a couple more sentences. Can I finish those up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and completely ignore the many examples where God makes clear the distinctions between debt slavery for Israelites and chattel slavery for foreigners. The Bible and the God of the Bible, in their own words, condone and endorse slavery. And that's all.
All righty, Matt. When you are ready to go, I'll start your time.
Okay, I noticed that was it just me or did his mic kind of go in and out for a second?
It went like he had a delay where it
Okay,
wasn't
I
feeding
was
him in
just
as fast, but it was only for
I
like a
think
couple of seconds.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing connection on my end. That's all. Because I was okay. I am ready, so you can go ahead and start the timer, James.
Go ahead.
Okay, so does the Bible endorse slavery? I will be arguing why I hold to the position the Bible does not endorse slavery. I'm going to give 3 points as to why I believe it does not. Point number one, the first reason, most likely, is simply a semantic dispute on how endorse is defined and possibly even slavery as opposed to my opponent. The definition of endorse is to declare one's public approval or support of. When I read that definition of endorse, I interpret that as saying someone or a society will be better having done a certain action as opposed to having not done it. I don't believe it's possible to make a case the Bible is teaching a society will be better off practicing slavery as opposed to not practicing it. Most atheists, however, seem to define endorse simply as if there is a prescription in a law on how to accomplish a certain action, that is synonymous to the endorsement of that action. But if this is that the position, are atheists willing to admit that modern law in the U.S. is endorsing slavery as well, under things like the exception clause in the 13th Amendment, or endorsing the use of addictive substances, or even killing another human being simply for being inconveniently conceived? If not, then this would show motivated reasoning or special pleading concerning one set of law codes over another. So, based on how I interpret the definition of endorse, I can say the Bible does not endorse slavery. And I would even say most people who are not motivated should agree with that. The second point, there are actions allowed in the Bible that are, although are considered evil, God allows them and in some cases legislates them in law code. For example, asking for a king by the Hebrews was considered an act of evil in the eyes of the Lord. God warns them through Samuel what will happen. In 1 Samuel chapter 8:17, he warns them that they will be slaves of the king. Even after this, they still wanted a king, so God gave them the desires of their heart and gave them rules on how a king should govern. Second one, allowing divorce because of the hardness of man's heart. Jesus explains that divorce wasn't God's intention for humanity. Malachi 2:16 even says God hates divorce in some translations and speaks of it in a negative context, displeasing God. Paul also speaks against divorce, and yet it's still legislated in the Mosaic law, Deuteronomy 24:1 through 4, for example. And lastly, persecution of believers. The Bible in the New Testament speaks positive of Christians being persecuted. James even says to receive it joyfully. The disciples actually celebrated when they faced the same mistreatment that Jesus faced and considered themselves worthy to face it. But we don't consider that as an endorsement of persecution or as an endorsement of persecution. So these are three specific actions that are viewed as evil in the Bible and yet are legislated or considered praiseworthy to endure. Yet we don't say the Bible is endorsing any of these actions. So why would we say that with slavery? And my final point, if by simply pointing out passages of Scripture legislating slavery or telling someone to be obedient is endorsing slavery, can I take that same standard of reasoning and say passages in the Bible that are endorsing freedom is the Bible endorsing freedom, such as Leviticus 25:10, John 8:36, Galatians 5:1, and multiple others.
1 minute left.
Okay. So the Bible endorsing freedom. Since Jesus says there are weightier matters of the law, such as love, justice, and mercy, then we could actually conclude the Bible is endorsing freedom, not slavery, by the standard that atheists use to say it's endorsing slavery. So, in conclusion, it's reasonable to hold the position the Bible is not endorsing slavery based on these 3 points that I gave. And that is it.
All righty, you have 24 more seconds left if you'd like it.
I'm good.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stop here. We're going to go into the open discussion portion. I will only jump in if anybody gets, too bad at cutting each other off. But I think you guys will have a nice civil discussion, and the timer will begin now.
Okay. Since you had just went, I guess I can start us off here. So you seemed to me like you were changing definitions of endorse, applying hyper-specific definitions and equivocating certain ideas of endorsement. I feel like the passages that I laid out show that God is tacitly endorsing the taking of foreign peoples as slaves, and he's knowingly telling you that you can't do that for your fellow Israelites. And so like that is an endorsement of keeping foreign peoples as property, as slaves, controlling their work and gaining benefit from their work. So, I mean, like, I guess I don't understand your, like what you started out with in your opening statement, this whole endorsement argument. Maybe you can articulate it in a different, better way.
Like when you see a politician say, like there's something that's being endorsed and Donald Trump comes on and says, I'm Donald Trump and I approve this message, or I'm endorsing this. I look at that as when someone is endorsing a certain action, that person is saying, we want this action to win out over the other action. We want this action, all things considered, to be practiced as opposed to another action. Because if that's not the case, then I don't think there's an actual endorsement. It's just simply allowing the practice to happen.
Right. Okay. So if you're God, right, being blasphemous here, if you're God, you're all powerful and you have the power to dictate the behavior of this group of people. Do we agree with that point?
That you could, if you didn't want to, sure.
Okay. So we agree that God is in control of the Israelite people. He regularly dictates how they are to behave.
Sure.
Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 explicitly has God giving a commandment for them to keep foreigners as property to the point where they can pass them down as property within their family.
Well, I don't look at that as a commandment because it says
it's part of the commandments.
But it's not saying thou shalt purchase a foreigner from a foreign nation.
Well,
it's just saying you may do that, and I just think
So this is definitely this is definitely an
condition.
endorsement of slavery. There's no way for you to get around this. This is an endorsement of taking people as property.
I mean, look, if you're going to say that simply having a law code saying that endorsing that just allowing something to happen is an endorsement, do you hold that standard to all law codes, or is it just the Bible?
Well, I mean, for our specific discussion, we're talking about God who has absolute control over the behavior of the Israelites. This is very different from any kind of modern law codes or any kind of modern
Well,
argumentation
no, I
that
don't
you
think
would
it
use.
is.
Oh, it definitely is, because
Well,
God is supposed to be.
Dr. Josh Bowen, who you've actually said has actually talked about the common law codes in the ancient Near East, and this is very consistent with some of those law codes. So that's
Right.
not law codes that are necessarily endorsed by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So why would we not also look to modern
It
law codes?
literally has God handing down these law codes to somebody. Like, I
I
don't know what
understand
you're
that.
talking about, Matt. Like, I
Are
really
you
don't know.
you used Dr. Josh
Hey,
Bowen's
Matt, if you
definition
just a
earlier,
point
right?
of moderation, Matt, if once you're done speaking, if you just give Godless a chance to respond, and then as soon as he's done, respond back,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you
So
done?
Matt, given what I've laid out so far, why is it that if God did not endorse chattel slavery, why does he painstakingly go through in the verses prior to that 44 through 46? Why does he specify that you cannot do this to Israelites? You can only do this to foreigners. So this is an endorsement that, hey, as long as you don't do it to Israelites, you're cool to do it. Like, that's
Well, I
exactly what
think
it's saying. Do you want me to read the passages?
no, I think you just argued earlier that God was endorsing slavery for Israelites too, weren't you?
Well, for debt,
I mean,
a form of it, debt
indentured
slavery
service, yeah.
is the form that you could that
Yeah.
Israelites could subject themselves to, but also you can subject Israelites to. Like, for instance, in there's this one
Yeah.
passage in Kings where a debt collector comes to a woman and she has to give up her children into debt slavery in order to pay debts. So that's one way in which a child or a person can be forced into debt slavery against their will.
Yeah, but you're appealing to foreign slaves here, but your whole opening statement was also appealing to Hebrew slaves. I'm simply saying, yeah, there's law codes dealing with all of them. I don't really think
Oh,
that that's
okay.
necessarily endorsement. It's like in the U.S. today when a foreigner can't go vote because they don't show an ID. That's not an endorsement of suppressing someone's ID. It's just the way there's just different distinctions there. So I don't really
No,
know
but
what the
that I
objective
mean
is.
that could be voter that it could be an instance of voter suppression. But we're not here to talk about politics. We're here to talk about whether or not the
Yeah, I'm not.
God of
I'm
the
just
Bible,
using that as an
not even
example.
the God of the Bible, but just the Bible in general, endorses slavery. Matt, if I could ask you for just a human moment, real quick, if you were in control of a group of people, absolute omnipotent control of a group of people, would you say, "Hey, it's okay to own somebody as property"?
Would I say it's okay to own somebody's property? No, I probably
Yes.
wouldn't.
Okay, you're better than your own God, or at least your own
Well,
holy book.
God doesn't use it, or He does. You're not going to find a passage saying it's okay to own someone's property.
No, the fact that he legislates how to acquire
Okay.
slaves and how to treat slaves, even going as far as to distinguish what is to happen if a slave is killed by an ox. Like, they go through, like, the Bible goes through this, separates the two, and definitely endorses the keeping of slaves. Even in the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20:17 has male and female slaves listed, as well as women listed as
I
property.
don't think you want to use the Ten Commandment argument. That would
I
actually
did,
hurt. Well,
but
see,
I just did. So
The Ten Commandments actually says, "Do not steal, and do not covet." The definition of covet is the desire to possess someone or something that they own without
no, no,
regard
no,
to
no.
their right.
So
Hold on, I'm
you're
almost
twisting
finished.
Exodus
No, I'm
20:17.
almost finished. You started interrupting me. If it's the case that someone has their freedom stolen against their will, then that's a violation of the Ten Commandments, right?
Israelites.
No, I'm asking. It doesn't specify
No, no,
Israelites, though.
no. But the law was given to the
I do.
Israelites. This law. Hold on. I'm trying to answer you, Matt. Are you gonna let me fucking answer, Matt?
Well, look, you're not answering the
Try
question I
to
asked. It's just a
try
yes or
to
no question.
try to give them a chance, even if you might think it's a yes or no question, and then you can always re-ask it or restate it.
Okay.
The 10 Commandments were given to the Israelites to govern how the Israelites are to be governed, or how they're supposed to live. So that was law given to the Israelites, meant to govern how Israelites are supposed to treat each other. Do not covet your neighbor's property. The neighbor would be male. So do not covet your neighbor's property is do not covet your male's neighbor's property, which includes livestock, his house, his woman, like as property, and male and female slaves. So that was not about like taking people from nations around them. In fact, God later on in Numbers 31 says that, you are to kill everybody but the young virgin girls. And then they have them stealing young virgin girls from the Midianites. So either you're pointing out a contradiction, or it's just simply not the context that you're wanting it to be in.
Well, I'm going to ask you the question again. Yes or no? If someone takes someone against their will, is that stealing their freedom or not?
I'm not going to play into your yes or no kind of Mitch McConnell fucking questions, Matt.
I just need a yes or no question.
But it's not a yes or no answer. It's a nuanced answer. It's nuanced. That's what I'll say. Nuance. You want one word fucking answer, Matt? Nuanced.
Okay. Look, I can answer it. The answer is yes. You'd be violating. You'd be stealing their. Well, you're going to interrupt me now.
No.
The answer is yes. You would be violating their freedom. You would hold on. I'm almost finished. Don't interrupt me. You would be violating, you'd be stealing their freedom against their will. You would also be violating the commandment, do not covet, which is the desire to possess someone or something without regards with their rights. And in Exodus 21, verse 16, if anyone kidnaps a man and keeps him or sells him as a slave, he must be put to death. So clearly we see passages of scripture that is actually punishing by death the act of kidnapping someone and forcing them into slavery. Wouldn't you agree?
No.
Okay, why not?
I mean, are you going to let me fucking answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you're ripping it out of context. You're trying to apply the context of these laws applying to everybody and mentioning everybody. Where in Exodus 2017, now I'm going to give you a chance to answer, where in Exodus 2017 does it delineate not to covet somebody else and their property? It does not, I don't think that it says that, but can you point out to me in Exodus 2017 where it says that?
Where it says what now?
Point out to me where it says don't covet another person.
And the passage it says do not covet.
You're not answering my question yet again. I'll bring it up. And I'll read it right here on air. And,
Exodus 20, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, 10 Commandments.
Yes, I know exactly where they are.
21. Exodus 21:16 says, "He that stealeth a man and keeps him or sells him must be unalived." Well, I don't need to use unalive here. We're on TikTok. It must be put to death.
Right. If you steal another Israelite. Not if you procure a chattel slavery. That's the context.
Now you're trying to add something.
No. I'm just trying to put this into proper context. And are you going to let me actually speak here, Matt? No. This is where you get your juggernaut name from, right?
No, Matt, you do have
I'm the juggernaut, bitch.
Matt, you do have to. You do have to let him speak
because he's been talking enough. I'm going to get my point out real quick. You're not going to get to. You're not. Hold on, I'm almost done, James. He keeps claiming I'm interrupting. I've not interrupted him hardly at all. He's interrupted me a lot more times than I've interrupted him.
You guys are kind of cutting into each other, so I'm just appealing to.
So let me finish this statement right quick. If you take a hermeneutical approach to that passage, where in that passage do you find that only applies to Hebrews? When Jesus actually in the New Testament actually talks about this in front of Hebrews and Gentiles and everyone.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening there, Matt. So Exodus 20:17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or woman is actually how it's translated. Male or female slave, ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. So nowhere in Exodus 20:17 does it say you shall not covet another person. It lists property, including his woman, the male or female slaves. So, I mean, obviously in this, it has God handing down these commandments saying, hey, look, y'all have slaves, and I'm totally cool with that. Don't covet your neighbor's slave.
Oh, so you're saying because it doesn't make a absolute list of what not to covet, you're just assuming he only wants you to not covet those things listed? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then I don't know why you even brought that up. So I'm going to ask you
Well, no,
again.
so can I
When
can
you
I can I
take a
ask?
hermeneutical approach to that passage, where do you get that that only applies to Hebrews, especially since in the New Testament, Jesus talks about the Ten Commandments and even applies a neighbor as a foreign Samaritan who that they did not like. So I'm trying to figure that out.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is why you won't actually answer my questions, because I'm trying to answer yours.
I
You
just
don't
asked you
like.
a question.
I'm
You have
talking,
not answered
Matt.
it yet.
I'm talking. I'm talking. Do you recognize that I am talking right now?
I just want you to answer the
Put
question.
your
You've not answered
juggernaut.
it yet.
Put your juggernaut attitude down for a minute. Can you?
I just want the question answered. It's a simple hermeneutical question, and that's how we read the Bible.
No. So in Exodus 20:17, it says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house," and then lists property. What I am trying to do right now is I'm trying to show you that it doesn't say you shall not covet another person. It's you shall not covet your neighbor's property. That's what I'm pointing out to you. That's what you're not wanting to say. And that's why you're twisting all of this stuff. It's very obvious if you actually read the scriptures that I am pointing out here that they are distinguishing between Israelite people as well as foreign people. That's why God says that you can acquire slaves, chattel slaves, from the nations around you, because you're not supposed to acquire chattel slaves from within the nation of Israel. That's what it says. That's what it means. And prior to Leviticus 25:44 through 46, it even specifies, hey, you're not supposed to keep Israelites as chattel slaves. You're only supposed to keep foreigners as chattel slaves.
Well, actually, you're not going to find the word chattel slave in that Hebrew word there. It's the same word ebed as the Hebrew word for Hebrews as well as even other things. But I'm still trying to get an answer to the question. The Bible clearly forbids to not steal. That would include, based on how I read it, stealing somebody's freedom. And the Bible says, do not covet. I don't think you should covet anyone's freedom, too. So I'm just trying to figure out how you can just say that only applies to Hebrews and not others, especially when Jesus in the New Testament is actually, when they ask who neighbors are and stuff like that, he actually brings up a Samaritan as a neighbor. So
So you're
I'm
being
just not getting an answer
anachronistic
to
right
this
now.
question.
So you're being
What's that?
anachronistic right now, and you're ripping the Hebrew Bible out of its context. It's very clear
Just
that the
doing what
New
Jesus said.
Testament, I don't give I don't care what Jesus says. Okay.
Really?
Godless
Well, that's
Godless
not going to work
respond.
if you're debating a Christian.
Let Godless respond real quick, Matt, and then you can respond back.
Okay.
So in the Hebrew Bible, God clearly distinguishes between the Israelites and foreign slaves. He specifically says that the Israelites you're not to rule over harshly as you would a foreign slave. This distinguishes between debt slavery, which is included in the whole indentured servitude, and like saying that, you know, they can sell themselves into debt slavery or into, you know, this debt repayment kind of thing. Like, while it doesn't say chattel slavery exactly, like it doesn't use that phrase, it's very clear that God distinguishes between foreign and Israelite slavery. One is chattel slavery, where you can own them as property, and the other is very obviously debt servitude. Now, I want to move past this point, continuing on with the Exodus 20:17. You very generally say, oh, it just means don't covet. And then you extend this commandment out to other things, which is disingenuous because it's not actually in the text here. What's actually in the text is that you shall not covet your neighbor's property, which includes house, woman, male and female slaves, as well as livestock, or anything that belongs to your neighbor, like as property, belonging. So this is very clear endorsement of keeping slaves, and also the sexual slavery that I brought up that you're not even touching on. Let's just say that the Bible, you know, doesn't have chattel slavery in it. It does, but let's say that. Sexual slavery. How about you handle that, Matt? Can you explain how there's no sexual slavery in the Bible?
Sure. I think under that situation in Exodus 20 or 31 that you brought up, if you have read, or Numbers 31, if you had read a few chapters earlier, we have an interesting uh, event in which the king, the Moabite king, actually tries to get Balaam to curse Israel because they see God is driving people out and bringing them in, and he tries to curse them. That does not work. So what did they end up doing? They end up uh, kind of mixing with them, having sexual intercourse with them. Phineas, the high priest, actually goes and kills a Hebrew man who had a Moabite woman in the tent that brought about this plague. They were being seduced. So when you look at the context there, it's not like the Moabites were just minding their own business, and the women seemed to be happily coming in and having these actions with men. Furthermore, later on, we get a very beautiful book, the book of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite woman who chooses to go with Naomi. She wants to be part of the Israelite group, becomes, in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. So what I see going on there is just a cultural norm in which these clans and these people were constantly battling each other, and it seems to be quite likely that this was just part of the society, and no one really thought anything wrong of it. And one could even argue the women were probably perfectly fine with being part of the Hebrew group based on Ruth.
Okay, so
I
can
wouldn't call it
are you
rape.
done? It is definitely rape. All of that is rape. Every relationship in the Old Testament would be rape at this point. So none of that matters. Ruth doesn't matter for Numbers 31,
Think
and
that is
the
promoting
preceding.
rape.
I am talking, Matt. Do
Matt,
you
you
know
have to
how a
let him.
conversation works?
Well,
Matt, you
James,
just have to let.
I think you're going to have to do like a 45-second limit, because he goes on quite a
Well,
while.
Did
And
you
I,
have a
to be
45-second limit, Matt?
to
no, well,
be
we need to,
to
because
be
you've been speaking a lot.
to be fair, Matt. In this last one, you did cut him off.
I did
We've only got
go more than 45 seconds. I agree, but I do
we've
think we're going to need to limit our time here.
okay. We've only got about 5 minutes left. I think that if you guys are patient, try to make your points quick, concise, but please try not to cut each other off. It's better for the viewing audience. Godless, go ahead, and then Matt right after that.
Okay. So Ruth doesn't matter as far as Numbers 31 goes, and also the preceding incidents that led up to Numbers 31, that also similarly doesn't matter, because my contention is that Moses specifically commanded that the Israelites, well, Moses on the behest of God, commanded that the Israelites go in and kill everybody in the town, with the exception of the virgin girls, who were then forced into marriages to not only the warring Israelites that killed their families, but also to the greater population of Israel. They were forced into those marriages, and that is sexual slavery, hands down. Hector Avalos has also identified this as being sexual slavery. So it's not just me. I'm just not making some kind of harebrained argument. This is a scholarly admitted situation in Numbers 31. So you could try to argue your way around it, but it's just simply not going to divert from the fact that God definitely condoned this, especially considering that just after the virgin girls were taken as forced marriage brides, which, by the way, remember, there was no marriage. It was all just rape at this point. Later in Numbers 31, it actually has God specifically dictating how those girls were to be divvied up. 1 out of every 500 was sacrificed to God, and the rest were divvied up into the Israelite population. An even split between the warring men of Israel as well as those that were just in Israel in general.
Okay, so what you just said here is just really, you appeal to a scholar here. I'm going to appeal to Dr. Josh Bowen. And when specifically asked about Exodus 21:16, if someone kidnaps a man and keeps him or sells him as a slave, he did not believe that that was just for Israelites, that would apply, that was more broadly kidnapping any kind of foreigner and things like that. So if we're going to appeal to scholarship, I'm asking you, if the Bible has a death penalty for stealing someone's freedom against their will, then you're going to have to say that what the Bible that God was not advocating and actually was against that type of slavery. So it would have to be just more of a debt type slavery or prisoners of war type slavery. And I don't know why anyone would have a problem with that as being some sort of unjust thing, because we even do that type of stuff today. So I don't really see why you would even say the Bible is endorsing slavery at that point.
Okay, so you just admitted that the Bible does endorse slavery, specifically prisoners of war being forced into slavery. So
So I don't
regardless
consider
of
that an endorsement.
oh my God, Matt, how do you have a conversation?
I gave you an opening argument why I don't consider that
How
an
do you have a
endorsement, and
conversation?
you have
You
it.
got to
You have
talk.
Matt,
I
ignored
let
it
you
the
talk.
whole time.
Okay, point of moderation. Um, it's okay if we don't think the opponent's not responding to a question. The audience will decide
James,
that.
I just don't like the opponent claiming I just admitted endorsing something when I clearly laid out the reason why
He's going.
in my opening statement.
I'm just going to pause the time real quick because there's about a minute left. I'll give you guys like each about 20 seconds, 10 seconds to respond, and then so on. In debates, people are going to make a lot of claims, a lot of assertions. The audience will decide. I think both people are doing well. Let's continue. We're going to go ahead, Matt, and let Godless just start. He's going to ask you something, say something for like 20 seconds. You'll get about 10 seconds to respond, and you get to ask him something as well.
Okay.
All right. So, regardless of how the chattel slaves were procured, either through prisoners of war or through man stealing, or however you want to interpret that, you still have you have admitted that chattel slavery existed for prisoners of war. That's how they were procured. So that's still the Bible endorsing a version of chattel slavery and slavery in general. You haven't even responded to the sexual slavery bit. So, I mean, that's also supported. Debt slavery is also in there. So that is also supported. So it definitely supports and endorses slavery.
Okay. So I specifically responded to the Numbers 31. You had no response to that when I brought up Ruth, when I brought up what happened beforehand. I specifically did not say anything about the Bible endorsing chattel slavery. Just because people are taken in prisoners of war doesn't mean you're endorsing chattel slavery. I also laid out an argument at the very beginning in which the word endorse, I mean, if you're just going to define endorse as if it's written in the law code, that's an endorsement, then you're just going to have to say modern law is endorsing the disposing of a human life as disposable property simply for being inconveniently conceived. But I don't think that even the politicians today who are talking about abortion are endorsing abortion, who even want it to be allowed for women. I don't look at that as an endorsement. I think the politician, when asked, if you were to ask Kamala Harris, Kamala, would you prefer, all things considered,
and that
whatever.
That is time, but I want to give.
Just finish what I was going to say though, real quick?
Okay, you can finish that sentence, but we got to give Godless the chance that I promised to respond to that, and then we're going to go into your closing statement. For the Q&A section, you do not have to super chat to get a question asked. You just have to tag @JamesIsTired. If you're watching on Godless's stream, hop over real quick. You can ask your question, then you can hop back and watch it through Godless. Is that way? Remember, you don't have to super chat, but any super chats do get priority. Godless, go ahead and finish responding to Matt, and then we'll do Matt's closing, and then Godless.
Well, I was gonna. Don't I get to just finish what I was saying right quick?
Yes, I did promise that. Sorry, my bad. Go ahead and finish that sentence, and then Godless.
If you were to ask Kamala Harris, if you were to, you're okay with women's rights, abortion, but all things considered, would you prefer the baby be born, or would you prefer the woman aborted? She's going to say she would prefer the baby be born. And when I look, if you're saying an endorsement, then she would say, no, I'd prefer, all things considered, the baby to be aborted. And that's how I look at the word endorsement. And I think most people should agree with that reasonably.
Hard disagree on that bullshit. Endorsement or to endorse something is to declare one's public approval or support of. So it's either support or approval. In this particular instance, God, at least the Bible, definitely has the support of chattel slavery. Also, that's a totally disingenuous way to approach the question of do you support or endorse abortion, I feel like most reasonable people can identify what's wrong with your characterization of that particular topic, as well as how it translates into the slavery issue. So, I mean, very obviously, you're twisting what endorsement means and you're wanting to use a very specific version of it, therefore, committing an equivocation fallacy.
Okay, Matt, when you are ready, I'll start the timer for your closing statement. Remember, for questions, tag at James is Tired in the chat, and I will pull them up. All right, go ahead, Matt, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, I gave 3 reasons why the Bible does not endorse slavery. 2 of them he never even touched on. Obviously, the one about God calling, asking for a king evil, divorce. He hates divorce. He doesn't like Christians being persecuted, and yet all of that is even considered praiseworthy to endure or legislated in law, but none of that is an endorsement of the actions. I also mentioned how endorsement, any reasonable person would think when you're endorsing something, you're wanting that action to be done as opposed to another action. When you read Genesis, from Genesis to Revelation, no one comes away thinking, you know what? Um, it would have been better off if I had been a better Christian if I just owned a few slaves, as opposed to set slaves free. Because by the same standard, he's saying the Bible is endorsing slavery. It's also endorsing freedom, which is another argument he never bothered addressing in it. So he's going to have to admit, by the Bible standard, there's weightier matters of the law. Jesus says love, mercy, uh, and justice. So if these are the weightier matters of the law, and these are the things that God wants a Christian or a believer, anyone to practice, then it's going to be very difficult to say that God is endorsing slavery when he's endorsing this and holding that as the higher standard. So I just don't think he had any responses to this, which no atheist ever has had a response to it. And also, he was appealing to scholars. With Dr. Josh Bowen has been on record saying that Exodus 21:16, when I've had conversations with him, is not just exclusive to Hebrews only, but he looks at that as the Hebrews aren't supposed to just kidnap, they're not supposed to kidnap their own, but it also extends out to they're not supposed to kidnap foreigners or anything like that either. So I'm not sure why he didn't want to answer my question, since the Bible clearly forbids stealing someone, it clearly forbids coveting, and Exodus 21:16 offers a death penalty for that. Then I don't know why he just didn't want to answer my question when I asked him, where does he conclude that? I can't remember what question I was going to ask him, but I know I asked him where did he conclude that that any of this is a violation of someone's human rights unjustly. And if we didn't even get into my definition of slavery, but I defined it, and I can't remember exact words, but slavery is the way I define slavery is the unjust stealing of someone's freedom, um, and holding them enslaved. That's how most people intuitively think of slavery, that it's done unjustly in some form. But if you're talking about prisoners of war, if you're talking about ruling over these nations that were practicing these evil customs mentioned in Leviticus 18 ruthlessly, I think that is more than just. But I don't think God is endorsing the ruling over another nation simply because he's allowing that under certain circumstances. If that's the case, then he's just going to have to say, if he's okay with, my body, my choice, that he is endorsing the killing of a 100% human being simply for being inconveniently conceived, and viewing them as disposable property. How much more time do I got, James?
You have one. You have 1 minute, Matt.
And that's one of the things that every time we get into these conversations with atheists, when you start bringing up modern law, what you end up doing is exposing what's known as a performative contradiction. The atheist is all more than willing to criticize God for the slavery in the Bible. But then when you start breaking down these views that they have, they want to avoid this idea that they are actually endorsing by their own standards the same thing in modern law. They're endorsing the taking another human life and disposing of it as property, or they're endorsing, if they're okay with the 13th Amendment exception clause, they're endorsing slavery that in that regard. And there would be laws written on how to take care of and deal with prisoners, especially in an uprising. You know, police officers are allowed to strike someone.
You can
Okay.
finish your last
Yeah,
sentence.
they're allowed to strike a prisoner, which the exception clause would be considered a slave. So if he's okay with all that, that's also endorsing slavery.
Okay, Godless, when you are ready, I'll start the time.
All right, so the purpose of this debate is not whether or not I personally endorse slavery or endorse any kind of modern understanding of slavery or any modern arguments that Matt has brought up in this debate as a red herring to try to throw people off of what this debate is actually about. What is this debate about? This debate is about whether or not the Bible endorses slavery. And we can go through this in a tiered way. Does the Bible endorse debt slavery? I feel like it's very much a thing that debt slavery existed. And since debt slavery is a form of slavery, then yes, most emphatically, the Bible does endorse slavery. But we can even go further than that and to say that chattel slavery is definitely endorsed. What we didn't hear from Matt tonight was a refutation of Leviticus 25:44 through 46. He tried to shift the context. He tried to twist scripture in a way that's very unnatural to the understanding of it. We even had him at one point agree that prisoners of war were forced into chattel slavery, were forced, as a point of war to be property of Israelites. We heard him literally say that that is endorsed by it. He tries to downplay it and say that's not really slavery, but as we understood from the definition of slavery, it definitely is slavery. And then he didn't even begin to touch on the sexual slavery that is all throughout the Bible, starting with Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. That is definitely a form of an example of sexual slavery in the Bible. And then we move on throughout the entirety of the Hebrew Bible, and we find sexual slavery being practiced all throughout it. And it even continues on into the first century with the New Testament. So does Matt have an argument against the sexual slavery in the Bible? No. So does that mean that the Bible endorses sexual slavery? Most emphatically, yes. God definitely endorses and condones this kind of behavior, given that God specifically, handles how the virgin girls in Numbers 31 are to be divvied out to the Israelite men and forced into marriages there. So to touch on some of the things that Matt says I didn't actually cover, which is an actual bad faith kind of interlocutor thing of doing a gish gallop, which Matt is known for. That's why he's known as the juggernaut. Harden a man's heart. He gave the example of divorce, how that was allowed because man's heart is hardened. I would counter that with this, the fact that God can dictate what kind of diet the Israelites are to eat, as well as what clothes they are to wear, and even dictate that they are supposed to sacrifice their firstborn children to God. In like a burnt offering kind of thing. And Jephthah's daughter is a very explicit example of this actually happening through different means, not the means of Numbers 31 or any other means in which children are sacrificed to Yahweh, but it's still there. Then he goes on into saying that nobody would have thought as a matter of religious conviction to own slaves. That was the fucking norm up until 1780 or 1865. Even past 1865, it was a religious conviction to persecute those of a different race. And so I don't know what in the fuck Matt is talking about there. Matt also tries to obfuscate the laws of the Hebrew Bible with whatever in the fuck Jesus was teaching in the New Testament. And I just don't see how that affects anything in the Hebrew Bible. If Jesus is God and God is the same in the past as he is now and as he will be in the future, then it most definitely is the case that Jesus, through his whole association with God, supports the sexual slavery, the chattel slavery, and the debt slavery of the Hebrew Bible. So therefore, no matter what Jesus says in the New Testament, he's perfectly fine endorsing and supporting the slavery that occurred in the Hebrew Bible. And then he also talked about how God was seeking punishment on those other nations around the Israelites for doing horrible things like child sacrifice. Matt forgets, or at least he forgets to tell the audience, that the Israelites were also performing child sacrifices and doing all these things. Not to mention the whole illogical argument of, oh, the Israelites went into the Midianites to kill everybody and then take the young virgin girls as sexual slaves. Apparently, killing small baby boys was a way to prevent the sacrifice of small baby boys. Like, was the actual problem that they were sacrificing small babies to Balaam or whoever in the fuck they were actually worshiping? Or what was it, the fact that they were sacrificing the babies to begin with? Kind of seems like God was jealous of another God getting child sacrifices, and so he wanted that to stop, is what it seems like to me. And I feel like a plain reading would show that. I'm not sure how much
time, but you can finish your last sentence, Godless.
I'm good. I'm done.
You hit it right on the 5:01 mark. So it's like, did you practice, my friend?
No, that was off the cuff.
Off the cuff. Matt seemed to be off the cuff as well, and you guys both did well during the debate. I'm going to start looking for questions. Please, like I said, tag at James is Tired, and I will pull your question up, or super chat it. That'll bump it ahead in the line. And how we do questions is the question can get asked to a particular person, then the other person can make like a 1 or 2 sentence comment to it. A question from Jason Torn: does the Bible declare approval of divorce?
In the matter of a man divorcing a woman for certain reasons, yes. There's never a situation in the Hebrew Bible where women are given this particular thing. So it's really just a man seeking to divorce a woman.
What was the question there? What does the Bible declare? No, it actually declares disapproval explicitly of divorce. In Malachi it says that it displeases God. Paul speaks against it. Jesus explicitly speaks against it when he says to not divorce other than sexual immorality. And he says that it wasn't this way from the beginning. So we can easily conclude, even though there's laws allowing for divorce in the Bible, that God is very displeased with divorce.
Do you have anything from the Hebrew Bible?
Yeah, Malachi.
I mean, you seem to have quoted Paul there, but what's the verse in Malachi?
Malachi, some of the translation says, God says, I hate divorce. But that passage there saying that it displeases God. And also Proverbs says, do not neglect the wife of your youth. Let yourself be always enticed or by her bosom. So the Bible is actually very pro not divorcing. If it's the case that they can let me ask you, then we can say it's not slavery. It's not a proven slavery.
Let me ask you this. Is God omnipotent?
Well, I thought this was questions. I thought the debate was over.
Oh, okay. I mean, you're not wanting to actually dialogue. I got it. So Matt isn't wanting to dialogue right now. So I guess I will talk. If God is omnipotent, if God is omnipotent,
your chance in the debate, and now I'm just responding to what Jason said.
If God is omnipotent, then He can specify whatever laws He wants to. So if there is anything that He allows or He allows to occur in the Israelites, then that is tacit support of the action. God allows for divorce in the Hebrew Bible, therefore divorce is supported by God. He supports
divorce is your conclusion, even though he says
I'm sorry, we're not in the debate anymore, Matt.
You couldn't shut up, so I'm going to respond. So does that mean God is just contradicting himself?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're not in the debate anymore, Matt.
Sorry about that, guys.
Is God contradicting himself or not?
We're gonna go to. Sorry about that. I was completely kicked out. My internet. My apologies, guys.
Let me ask you something real quick, James.
Well, Matt.
I got a quick question. Whenever
Okay,
they
you can
ask a
ask me the question.
question, if when they ever ask a question, are we responding to Jason or whoever asks, or do we get to debate each other in another mini debate? Because I'm okay with that if you want to do that.
It's so it is just a response to the question of Jason.
Okay. So when Godless was asking, is God omnipotent? That would have been completely irrelevant to the question, right?
He can respond to the question in any way
Well, no,
that
it
he would
wasn't.
like
He
as
had
a
already
debater.
responded. He responded to what I said.
I would blame me for having the technical internet issues, and I was unable to control that part of the conversation. So
Okay,
that
fair
would
enough.
be my bad. Okay. Next question. If a character in the Bible commands a woman to marry regardless of her will, is that an example of the Bible endorsing slavery? We'll let Matt start off with this one, and then Godless can respond. Go
No,
ahead, Matt.
as I said before, if we read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, no one in their right mind, if they're not just motivated reasoners, would conclude that, oh, you know what? In order for me to be a better follower of God, I should have forced someone to marry a woman to marry me against my will, or I should have taken on a slave here or there, or things like that. Now, I do believe that there's certain situations in which a Christian may be justified to purchase another person because they feel like that they're actually trying to deliver that person into a better state, which is what I think is going on in Leviticus 25. But no, that's not an approval just because of that.
So
Alrighty.
to answer totally not whatever in the fuck Matt just said. So basically, yes, that is endorsing slavery. That is God commanding a woman to marry regardless of her will, as we saw with my Mark Klumpberg quote. As far as sexual slavery goes, this would be a case of sexual slavery. God definitely commanded the sexual enslavement of women.
Okay, this is just a super chat. It's a question from Matt. Godless can probably just give us what's next up on his channel. It says, Matt Adams, love you, bro. Which platform are you on? I miss you, man.
I'm on most of the time. I'm on TikTok. I'm also on Discord sometimes.
Alrighty.
Also Clubhouse, but I just pretty much have conversations coming up on my channel. That's what I've been primarily doing here lately. I've also started gaming a lot more, doing game streaming over there on Godless Engineer Plays. You can go to geplays.com and you'll get sent directly to that channel. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing.
Okay, let's see. Also, please like, subscribe, especially like the video. That helps the algorithms. Although mainly these days I do YouTube Shorts, although I do really wish I had more time to host more of these. I appreciate both debaters for joining. It says in Numbers 31:18, when Moses commanded his people to kill everyone except for the young women who they may keep for themselves. What is meant by keep for themselves? We'll let Matt start with that one, and then because the next one's directed at Godless, and Godless can respond. Matt, go ahead.
Well, I think what is meant by that is, it could be they could end up marrying, but I think God is just integrating them in with the Hebrews, like, Ruth, who wanted to be integrated in. And I think this is actually God just giving them blessing to be part of that as opposed to just killing them. And I also think what is going on here is a common problem of just simply reading modern context and culture, because we've been culturalized by Christianity. We're reading the Bible through the modern context of what Jesus has done, and just assuming that this is implying that we get that they're going to rape. It's no different than the song "Baby It's Cold Outside," which was supposed to be a women's liberation song written in 1949. 70 years later, they were accusing the writers of approving of and endorsing date rape, and they tried to take it off the air. So what is happening here is actually a condemnation of modern society, because that's what we think. That's the evils that we go to naturally. And I don't think Moses and them was just simply saying, oh, yeah, we're going to do this so they can be sexual slaves. I don't think that was going through their mind.
Okay, so all of that shit that Matt just said is totally bullshit. So obviously, may keep for themselves is meaning that they are taking the women, the girls, the young girls, not women, young girls, these virgin girls, as plunder. And this is more explicitly determined later on in Numbers 31 when they specify how these girls are to be divvied up amongst the men of the Israelite population. It is meant for them to be forced into marriages. You can't tell me that a group going into another community, slaughtering their entire family, and then stealing them away from that group, that community, and then forcing them into marriage is not sexual slavery. As we saw with Mark Klomberg's definition of it, it definitely matches that definition. So what do they mean by may keep for themselves? Very obviously, it's meant to force them into sexual slavery. I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you there.
Thank you. Next question is from Christian author Johnny Haas, who authored the book The Courtroom of Atheism. His question is for Godless Engineer. Do you think slavery could ever benefit the slave?
Could it? Sure, maybe. But I think that the larger issue here is the fact that slavery even exists in the Bible. So basically, whether or not there are benefits that are afforded to the slave, I think the fact that the slave has rights stripped from them and that their autonomy is violated, that they do not have the same rights as, like, let's say, debt slaves, that they are owned by another person, their work, like whatever they produce, whatever benefits that they would get from their work is actually used to benefit their master instead of themselves. I think that is the larger issue, regardless of what kind of benefits you could try to argue your way around for slaves.
And I would say absolutely. In fact, most of the conditions in the Old Testament were beneficial. I already mentioned Ruth. We have Eleazar, Abraham's servant, who actually would have inherited the whole fortune had Abraham not had children. You could tell he loved Abraham. He was willing to go out and find Abraham's son Isaac a wife, doing all this stuff. You have the whole nation of Egypt, when they became poor and destitute, actually said to Joseph, "We will be your slaves." Same Hebrew word, is mostly translated as servant, abed, and they willingly sold themselves into that situation, and because they knew that with Joseph at the helm, a man who was being blessed by God, they were going to benefit far greater than if they tried to endure this famine on their own. So yeah, that in most cases in the Bible, the person did benefit from that. The slave did.
All righty. Just checking my Patreon, see if there's any questions through that. Nope, we are good on the Patreon questions as well. Also, if you become a channel member, I put that for like $1, the cheapest YouTube would let. It'll highlight your comment, and your questions will also take priority over other questions as well. That being said, I want to thank both debaters for coming on. I hope you guys have enjoyed the discussion. I think it was a good, solid back and forth. I was looking at Godless's stream earlier. Godless, you have an after show you're doing, or like an after discussion. Would you like to promote it real quick?
Oh, no, I'm not. I said I'll do a post debate after show if I get 15 or more teal super chats. I didn't get that, so I'm not doing it.
What is that? The TL.
Oh, well, it's $5 or above, and you can set a goal on your live streams now. So
Oh, I did not know that. I'll have to check into some of the newer things. Also, by the way, Matt, that was Nilesh. Nilesh, thank you for the super
Oh,
chats.
yeah, Nilesh.
Once again, thank you, Bill Brown, Jason Torn, Nilesh, Johnny Haas, the author of The Courtroom of Atheism. Thank you all for the super chats. Matt, do you have anything coming up? Any upcoming debates or something you would like to mention?
No,
before we get ready to close?
usually we do like some sort of after show back in the day, but Clubhouse, is just kind of dead, and Discord is kind of dead. But I mean, if anyone wants to go to Discord and have an after show, they can. But I don't really. I just mainly debate on TikTok. I had a very good back and forth with Ian the other day, and actually developed a new argument to lay in my arsenal that I was actually thinking could get unveiled tonight, but we didn't go down that route. But it seems like every time I debate this topic, I come up with new ways to approach it. And I just enjoyed approaching that with atheists who have never heard these before and see how they respond. But that's really about the only thing I've got going on at the moment.
Okay. To the chat, thank you for joining. I'm going to kick the outro, and until next time, guys, take care of one another.
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die. Many claim they like riding, but I know that they ain't. Ride or die.